What started as a normal celebrity interview spiraled into chaos when Colbert's jokes turned personal, leading to DeVito's dramatic exit that has viewers and social media in an uproar. The studio lights were extra bright last night on The Late Show as Stephen Colbert welcomed Hollywood legend Danny DeVito to promote his new film, The Last Laugh. The audience cheered as the beloved 79-year-old actor walked onto the stage with his trademark smile, waving to fans before settling into the guest chair. Nobody could have guessed that within minutes, the friendly atmosphere would turn into one of the most uncomfortable television moments of the year. "Welcome back to the show, Danny," Colbert began with his usual charm. "It's been a while since we've had you here." DeVito nodded, adjusting himself in the chair. "Thanks for having me, Stephen. Always good to be back. I'm really excited about this new movie." "Yes, The Last Laugh. Which is ironic because I hear there aren't many laughs in it," Colbert quipped, drawing a small chuckle from the audience. DeVito took it in stride. "Well, it's a dramedy, you know. There are some really funny moments, but it also talks about some serious stuff. That's what attracted me to the role." Colbert smiled, but something about it seemed off. The interview continued with standard questions about the film for the first few minutes. DeVito energetically described working with his co-stars and the message behind the movie. But when Colbert started shifting to personal questions, viewers at home sensed a change in the atmosphere. "You know, Danny, I've been watching your career since Taxi, and I've always wondered, how does someone of your unique stature manage to stay relevant in Hollywood for so long?" Colbert asked, emphasizing the word unique in a way that made several audience members shift uncomfortably. DeVito's smile tightened slightly. "Well, I focus on the work. Good stories and interesting characters don't have height requirements." "Fair point," Colbert replied, shuffling his note cards. "Speaking of interesting characters, I noticed you've been playing a lot of grumpy old men lately. Is that typecasting or just your natural personality coming through?" The audience's laughter was mixed with a few gasps. DeVito maintained his composure, though his eyes narrowed slightly. "I play characters that interest me, Stephen. Some are grumpy, some aren't. I've been fortunate to have a varied career." "Oh, varied. That's one word for it," Colbert said with a dismissive wave. "I mean, let's be honest. Your biggest role in the last decade has been playing Frank Reynolds, a disgusting troll of a human being on It's Always Sunny. Not exactly a stretch, is it?" The crowd went silent. DeVito's face flushed slightly, but he kept his cool. "Frank is a complex character, actually. There's more to him than just the surface-level stuff. And more to me, too, if you bothered to look." Colbert seemed determined to get a rise out of his guest. "Speaking of looking, I read that your ex-wife, Rhea Perlman, finally got tired of looking at you after all those years. What happened there? Did she finally realize she could do better?" Several audience members audibly gasped. DeVito's friendly demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by a hardened stare. "That's completely out of line, Stephen," DeVito said firmly. "Rhea and I have nothing but respect for each other. Our separation was mutual and private, and I'd like to keep it that way." Instead of backing off, Colbert doubled down. "Private? You're a public figure who spent decades playing vulgar characters. Your last film bombed so badly that they practically had to give tickets away. Is this new movie just a desperate attempt to convince people you can still act?" The tension in the studio was palpable. Camera operators exchanged nervous glances as DeVito sat up straighter in his chair, visibly working to control his anger. "I've been in this business for over 50 years, DeVito said, his voice steady but stern. "I've won Emmys, Golden Globes, been nominated for an Oscar, and directed films people still talk about decades later. I don't need to prove anything to anyone, especially not to a talk show host who thinks cheap shots count as comedy." Colbert's face twitched with annoyance. The interview was clearly not going as he had planned. The audience, initially expecting the usual light-hearted banter, was now witnessing something rarely seen on network television. genuine conflict. "Let's get back to the film," Colbert said, attempting to regain control. "In the last laugh, you play a washed-up comedian trying to make a comeback. Again, not much of a stretch. Are you going to ask a real question about my work? Or did you just bring me here to insult me?" DeVito interrupted, his patience clearly wearing thin. The studio fell completely silent. Even the band stopped their usual background music. Colbert's producer could be seen frantically signaling from offstage, but the host ignored her. "I'm just trying to have an honest conversation," Colbert said with a shrug. "Not my fault if you can't take a joke. Maybe that's why your career has become such a joke lately." The audience collectively held their breath. DeVito's face darkened as he leaned forward in his chair. For a man known for his small stature, he suddenly seemed to fill the entire stage with his presence. "You know what, Stephen? I came here to talk about a film I'm proud of, not to be your punching bag. If you had any respect for your guests or your audience, you'd be asking meaningful questions instead of trying to get cheap laughs at my expense." Colbert's smile turned cold as he leaned back in his chair. The audience was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming in the background. The host tapped his pen against his desk, clearly annoyed that DeVito wasn't playing along with his game. "Look, Danny, this is how interviews work. I ask questions, you answer them. If you can't handle a little light ribbing, maybe you should stick to those children's movies you did." "What was that one? Matilda? At least there you could hide behind animation and special effects." DeVito's eyes flashed with anger, but he took a deep breath before responding. "That's exactly what I'm talking about, Stephen. Matilda was a film I directed and starred in that has touched millions of children and families. It was a labor of love. But instead of asking me about the creative process or what it meant to me, you're using it as another cheap shot." Several audience members applauded DeVito's response, which seemed to further agitate Colbert. The host's face reddened slightly as he shuffled his cards again. "Well, the audience seems to be on your side tonight," Colbert said with a dismissive wave. "But let's talk about your new movie, since you're so sensitive. In The Last Laugh, you play a comedian who's past his prime and desperate for relevance. The reviews are saying it's your best work in years, probably because it's so autobiographical. Do you find it easier to act when you're basically playing yourself?" A producer stepped closer to the stage, clearly concerned about where this was heading. DeVito sat up straighter, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "You know, I've done interviews with Carson, Letterman, Leno, Kimmel, Fallon, all the greats," DeVito said firmly, "and not one of them felt the need to personally attack me to get ratings. What's happened to you, Stephen? You used to be better than this." The question hung in the air. For a moment Colbert seemed taken aback, perhaps even a little ashamed. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. "Oh, now we're doing career advice? That's rich coming from someone who's been riding on the coattails of a raunchy cable sitcom for the past 15 years. At least I show up to work every day and deliver. When was the last time you made something people actually wanted to see?" Few uncomfortable laughs scattered through the audience, but most people remained silent, witnessing the train wreck unfolding before them. DeVito's face flushed, but his voice remained steady. "I've been in this business since before you were old enough to tie your shoes, kid. I've directed films, produced award-winning movies, and taken roles that meant something. My work with Miloš Forman in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, with Tim Burton in Batman Returns, with Barry Levinson in Tin Men, these are films that will be studied long after your little talk show is forgotten." The audience erupted in applause, clearly siding with DeVito. Colbert's eyes darted nervously to his producer, who was now frantically signaling to go to commercial break. But Colbert ignored her again. "Wow, pulling out the resume," Colbert said with exaggerated surprise. "But you forgot to mention your biggest role, being the shortest man in Hollywood. Let's be real, Danny. Without your height, or lack thereof, would anyone even remember who you are?" Isn't that your whole shtick? The audience gasped collectively. Even Colbert's bandleader looked visibly uncomfortable, exchanging glances with the musicians. DeVito's face went from flushed to stone cold. He slowly removed his microphone and placed it on the desk between them. You know something, Stephen? I came on this show as a professional to talk about my work, but clearly you're more interested in bullying than interviewing. So let me tell you something. My height has never defined me. My talent, my passion, my dedication to my craft, that's what's kept me relevant for over 5 decades in an industry that chews people up and spits them out. DeVito stood up, and despite his small stature, he seemed to tower over Colbert in that moment. The host's smug expression faltered as he realized he'd pushed too far. "Danny, come on, sit down. We still have 5 minutes left in the segment," Colbert said, his tone suddenly conciliatory. "No, we don't," DeVito replied firmly. "What we have is a host who's forgotten the difference between humor and cruelty. You think being mean makes you edgy? It just makes you a bully." The audience began to applaud again, louder this time. A few people even stood up. Colbert's face twitched with a mix of anger and embarrassment. "Look, if you can't take a joke," Colbert started, but DeVito cut him off. "A joke is supposed to be funny, Stephen. There's nothing funny about disrespect. There's nothing entertaining about watching someone try to humiliate a guest who came in good faith." Two producers were now on the edge of the stage, clearly uncertain whether to intervene. The cameramen were panning between the two men, capturing every moment of the unprecedented confrontation. "You know what the real joke is?" DeVito continued, his voice rising with emotion. "The real joke is that you've become exactly what you used to mock. A shallow, mean-spirited talking head who cares more about viral clips than actual conversation." The studio was dead silent now. Even the most seasoned audience members had never witnessed anything like this on network television. Colbert's face had gone from red to pale, as the reality of the situation seemed to dawn on him. "Danny, please," Colbert said, his voice losing its edge. "I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. Let's take a step back." "No, Stephen," DeVito interrupted, standing his ground. "We're well past taking a step back. You invited me here and then tried to humiliate me on national television. What did I ever do to deserve that kind of treatment?" The audience murmured in agreement. One of the producers finally worked up the courage to approach the stage, whispering urgently in Colbert's ear. The host nodded stiffly, then forced a smile. "We'll be right back after these messages," Colbert announced, but DeVito shook his head. "No, I don't think so," the actor said firmly. "The audience deserves to see how this ends. They deserve to know that it's not okay to treat people this way, whether there's a camera rolling or not." The producer looked panicked now, making slashing motions at her throat to signal the camera operators to cut. But the main camera operator, a woman who had been with the show for years, deliberately kept her camera trained on the confrontation. The red light stayed on. "You want to know what the last laugh is really about, Stephen?" DeVito asked, addressing not just the host but the entire audience. "It's about a man who spent his whole career making others laugh at the expense of his dignity, only to realize too late that he'd become a punchline himself. It's about redemption and learning to stand up for yourself. Kind of fitting for tonight, don't you think?" A few audience members clapped. Then more joined in. Soon half the studio was applauding. Colbert's producer was frantically waving to the band leader, who reluctantly signaled the musicians to start playing, hoping to drown out the confrontation. But DeVito raised his voice to be heard over the music. "Turn that down," he commanded, and surprisingly, the band leader complied, silencing the musicians with a quick gesture. "For decades I've prided myself on being professional," DeVito continued. "I show up on time. I know my lines. I treat the crew with respect. I give interviews to help promote the projects that hundreds of hardworking people have poured their hearts into. And this is what it gets me? Public mockery from someone who should know better?" Colbert finally seemed to grasp the severity of What was happening? His show was spiraling out of control in real time, and with every passing second, social media was undoubtedly lighting up with clips of the confrontation. "Look, Danny, I apologize if my jokes crossed a line," Colbert said, attempting damage control. "That wasn't my intention. We try to keep things light and fun here. There's nothing light or fun about mocking someone's appearance, or their marriage, or dismissing their life's work," DeVito fired back. "You think because I'm short, or because I'm older now, that I'm an easy target? That I won't stand up for myself?" More applause erupted from the audience. Even some of the crew members were nodding in agreement. "That's not what I meant," Colbert started, but DeVito wasn't finished. "You know what the sad part is? I used to respect you. I used to think you were one of the good ones. But fame changes people, I guess. Makes them forget what it means to show basic human decency." The producer was now on stage, physically trying to guide DeVito toward the exit. But the actor stood firm, shrugging off her hand. "Sir, we need to go to commercial," she said anxiously. "Of course you do," DeVito replied. "Can't have people seeing the real Stephen Colbert, can we?" Colbert rose from behind his desk, his expression a mix of anger and embarrassment. "That's enough, Danny. You've made your point." "Have I?" DeVito asked, turning to face the audience. Directly. "Let me ask all of you something. Is this the kind of television you want to watch? Someone being belittled and mocked for cheap laughs? Is that entertainment to you?" The audience responded with a resounding, "No!" Several people were on their feet now. "I didn't think so," DeVito continued, "because most people understand the difference between good-natured ribbing and outright disrespect. Most people know where to draw the line." Two security guards appeared at the edge of the stage, clearly summoned by the panicking producers. DeVito noticed them and chuckled sadly. "Really? Security? For a 79-year-old man who's just standing up for himself? That's how we're ending this?" The guards looked uncomfortable, clearly not eager to physically remove a beloved Hollywood icon from the stage. Colbert, sensing the optics of the situation, quickly waved them off. "That won't be necessary," he said sharply before turning back to DeVito. "Danny, I think we both got carried away here. Why don't we take a break, cool down, and try to salvage the rest of the interview?" DeVito shook his head, a look of pity crossing his face. "There's nothing to salvage, Stephen. You showed everyone who you really are tonight, and I showed them who I am. I think we're done here." With that, DeVito turned and walked off the stage, head held high. The audience erupted in applause and cheers, many rising to their feet in a standing ovation for the actor who had refused to be bullied. Left alone on stage, Colbert stood awkwardly behind his desk, the sound of applause for his departed guest echoing throughout the studio. The host looked directly into the camera, his face ashen, knowing that millions of viewers had just witnessed his public humiliation. A humiliation he had brought on himself. "We'll be right back," he finally managed to say, his voice barely audible over the continuing applause. As the show cut to commercial, the damage was already done. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation were spreading across social media. Like wildfire. Danny DeVito Stands Up and Colbert Bully were trending nationwide. Celebrities and fans alike were posting messages of support for DeVito, praising his courage and dignity in the face of unprovoked attacks. By morning, the story had made headlines across entertainment news. "DeVito walks off Colbert after hosts. Insulting remarks," read one. "Legendary actor teaches talk show host a lesson. In respect," proclaimed another. Network executives called an emergency meeting. Sponsors were threatening to pull ads. Colbert's team issued a hastily written apology, but the public wasn't buying it. The damage to his reputation was severe and immediate. Meanwhile, Danny DeVito's new film, The Last Laugh, saw a surge in advance ticket sales. Interviews with other talk show hosts were quickly arranged, all promising to focus on his work rather than personal attacks. In the end, DeVito had indeed gotten the last laugh. Not through meanness or retaliation, but by simply refusing to let someone else diminish his worth. By walking away with his dignity intact, he had reminded everyone of an important truth. Real strength isn't about height or fame, or who can deliver the cruelest joke. It's about knowing your value and standing up for it, even when it would be easier to sit down and take the abuse. And as for Colbert, he learned the hard way that true comedy punches up, not down. That night changed the trajectory of his career, forever, serving as a powerful reminder that even the biggest names in television are not immune to the consequences of cruelty disguised as humor.